time of year.
Yep.
It is hard to believe, but it is.
I was making a lot of trips, and Amy in particular was making a lot of trips to the basement, bringing everything up to set out yesterday.
Yep, that's right. Mm.
Sounds like we're going to do a lot of listening and learning today. Is that essentially it?
That's essentially it.
I hope I learned a lot. I'm still trying to decipher what that ordinance says. I just
Yep.
totally lost.
It's a confusing ordinance. I'm looking forward to this presentation, but also the one by Scott Adams.
Yep. Hey, Sally.
Hey, Sally. Oh, she's not up.
Hey, Sally.
Hey, Sally.
Hey, Angie. Hey, Sally, are you a grandmother again yet? Right. Right.
Yes.
Pardon me. Hope I didn't contaminate anybody.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, Scott. Well,
there he is. Hey, Scott.
Bless you.
morning, Scott.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you. There he is.
Sometimes when I sneeze, it winds up being 20 in a row, so I'll hit my mute button if it happens again.
Yeah.
Good. You scared me both times.
I thought you were starting your presentation.
That's right.
Hey, Scott. Well, Angie and Alex, it's 10:30. David Holcomb is not going to be on. He called me this morning and gave me some comments. And I don't know about Bill Roberts.
Or Alan.
Or Alan, yeah. Are the people, what, Alex, when are the people from Land of Sky going to be on?
Actually, Mary Roberts, who had her husband had a medical thing today. So she sent some information to Scott, which I believe Scott's going to be presenting.
Okay.
Is that right, Scott?
That's correct. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
No, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm not too overly volumed with the headphones?
No, it's perfect.
Okay.
Right. Well, why don't we get started? Let me flip back over to the agenda. Let's just have a moment of silence. Amen. So thank each of y'all for being here. It's a lot. I think Alex was probably seeing into the future by scheduling it on Zoom. I was hoping we could meet, but I think it would have been impossible. So I'm glad we're doing this. Did y'all have a chance to look at the minutes that were circulated?
I'll move for approval.
Was that Mason?
Wait here. I would like to attach the 3-page summary I gave of my presentation since we were short on time. If that could be included as part of the minutes of the.
Is there any objection to that? Who made the motion? Was it Dan who made the motion and Mason seconded?
Correct.
Okay. Do y'all have any objection to including that as that the minutes be amended to add that report as an exhibit?
I have no objection.
No objection.
Any other? Let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we do have a quorum. Okay.
The one other comment I shared with you is that where it says that the commission did not feel there was information sufficient to make any recommendations, I think we all agree with that, but I would hope we agree we still need to look at
Yes, I think that's right. Yep. Okay, you ready to vote? All in favor, say aye. All opposed? That's unanimous, Angie. Um, the presentation on what y'all were doing with the steep slope stormwater. So Scott, I'll turn it over to you. You need to unmute now. There you go.
Thank you. Alex, can you enable screen sharing, please? Alex,
Scott,
are
I'm
you
going to
there?
make you a host, and then I think you can enable a screen share.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there we go. One moment. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, off we go then. So this is a presentation that was originally going to be given by Mary Roderick from Land of Sky Regional Council, which she's a coworker of mine, as I'm also with Land of Sky Regional Council and a contract planner with Montreat 3 days a week as the zoning administrator. So I'll quickly walk through this presentation, which again, she was originally going to give. I've had a little bit of coaching and overview on it. Certainly, I expect some of you will have more expertise and background with this, but if you'll bear with me, I'll give the presentation and maybe afterward, if you want to just take questions or comments. So my understanding.
Let me just ask you, Scott, at the end of this, will you make this available to us so we can study it in more detail? Good. Thank you.
Yes, I just received it late yesterday, so I apologize that I was not able to get that out.
No, that's fine. Great.
But I will share that shortly. So my understanding is, yeah, it's a little bit of a long title to the study, but it's a stormwater inventory and steep slope stormwater management concept plan. So basically, a stormwater system inventory is required under NPDES, which is the Discharge Elimination System. It's a fancy acronym from the Environmental Protection Agency regarding urban stormwater systems. Montreat's audit by the state DEQ on behalf of the EPA will be in 2022. So,
Scott, you're getting a little fuzzy.
Yes.
Maybe turn it up. Maybe turn it up a little bit too. That'd be helpful.
Sure. Tell you what, actually, I'm going to try just using my computer's audio.
Okay. Great.
Can you all hear me now?
Much better.
Okay. So the study is being funded by a 205J planning grant. That's just it's an acronym, or it's a grant that is funded by the EPA, and then it's a pass through with North Carolina DEQ, and it's got it right in front of me here. It's a water quality management planning grant. So essentially it's funding the study to do an asset inventory. The reason that it's important is that the Swannanoa River, which all of Montreat's watersheds flow into eventually, is on the 303D list for water quality impairment. 303D is a section of the Federal Clean Water Act that all states are required to keep a list of what are called impaired waters, whether that's industrial pollutants, sedimentation, what have you. The Swannanoa River is on that list, and just looking here, it looks like the Upper Swannanoa River Watershed Plan, which covered Montreat, was done in 2014. However, it did not directly address steep slopes. Also, just as a reminder, certainly for you all, Tropical Storm Alberto caused close to $1 million in infrastructure damage. And this map here is just showing the overall change in heavy precipitation events over the last 60 odd years or so. And as you see in the southeast, those events have increased by 27%. So that's a consideration going forward. So far, the project here in Montreat has inventoried things like inlets, outfalls, stormwater junctions. You'll see the acronym SCM, that's Stormwater Control Measure. That can be a whole range of things. That's not necessarily a BMP. That's another acronym. It's Best Management Practice. Things like water cisterns, swales, rain gardens that are behind the town hall.
Scott, I apologize. You're getting fuzzy again, so I don't know what
I'm
that is.
sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Let me check one other thing. Okay. I was trying to speak a little slower and clearer, so that way if I'm not getting fuzzy. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. So the stream assessment and the overall plan are being done by Blue Earth Engineering. It's a local firm out of Madison County, and as you're just reading along here with me, it's scoring both habitat and also what's called bank erosion hazard index. I think that's really just looking at the soil types that are there and the likelihood that it either is eroding or would erode at some future point. There are also water sampling locations within the town. These are bulleted out here. And on the next slide, yes, well, this slide actually shows an example of the stormwater inventory that's being done. In the link there at the left is actually an online map, which you all can click on once I share this. And you can click on each of the points, lines, and polygons within the map to find out what's there. For instance, if you click on the kind of dark purple issue icon, you'll see a couple of examples of was not able to find outlet or different things like that.
Scott, did this cover any of the streams that we talked about, particularly Wade up in the upper area? It listed
There
about
is a
5
water quality
streams.
there is a water quality sampling site. If you look in the far north, just at the town limits.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome. And also as part of the study, there was a survey done, I believe, last fall with residents. Have you seen any? These are just 2 examples of how people responded. Looks like erosion was one of the more popular responses. There was another question: do you manage stormwater on your property with a rain barrel, bioswale, etc.? Looks like there were about equal part yeses and nos, a handfuls of they weren't sure. In terms of the project overall, looks like there have been 62 field observations done by the engineering firm. There are some conceptual designs for stormwater control measures, and the end result of this is to have both a plan and a series of possible solutions, which is on this next slide here. Land of Sky will be applying for 319 funding. That's also another grant program from NCDEQ, and it is for implementation projects. It does require a 40% match from local partners. So that'll be a part of the post-project outcomes. And Land of Sky is also looking to develop a steep slope stormwater management guide. Currently, the state's stormwater design manual does not address steep slopes directly. Couple of examples from the region include Morris Hill Town Hall, and I cannot see this in front of me. I think it's Givens State. So I can share this with you all shortly, and any questions or comments? And I can certainly scroll back through the slides if you like.
Any questions? Scott, do you anticipate that they will be evaluating any of the Greeks and what you're going to get into in terms of other communities shortly, but in terms of any recommendations on what any setbacks should be, or what's fair and customary in this part of the world?
I'm not familiar with the particulars of the study to date. I don't necessarily know if it's going to look at any particular setbacks or buffers. In my next presentation, I'll show you that what I've found to date shows a pretty consistent statewide standard of somewhere between 25 and 30 feet buffers. Setbacks, and I know that's been a discussion to date, and we can jump into that in the next one. Yeah, there's essentially zoning setbacks, which are, that's from the street or within a property and buildings, and then buffers. You could, I know the argument's been made that buffers are effectively setbacks, and that's true to a degree, but buffers are technically separate from setbacks.
So what we should mean then when we're talking about it is taking Wade Stream, for example. It's a 30-foot buffer. You wouldn't call that a setback, even though it really has the same effect. Is that right?
That's true. I think the discussion that we all are having is, what is the net effect of the regulations on the use of a given property. So that's my understanding to date of I think Wade's concerns and possibly others.
Scott, the reference to the Land of Sky seeking funding to develop a steep slope stormwater management guide, is this simply for local application, or are they looking to add something into the North Carolina Stormwater Design Manual, which currently does not address steep slopes?
Right. It's my assumption, and I'm saying it's my assumption because I'm not as familiar with the project to date. It's my assumption that Land of Sky would want to certainly be able to develop something that is easily replicated in the communities that it serves. That's, the towns within the 4 counties, Madison, Buncombe, Henderson, and Transylvania. And I would think that it could certainly possibly act as a model for the state to adopt. But I'm not familiar with the background or the intent necessarily, if it's just intended to be just local or adopted by the state. I would assume if it's, kind of proof of concept here in the mountains, then, certainly if it's a good proof of concept ordinance for the mountains, then you could certainly apply it on a steep slope anywhere else in the state.
Any other questions? Well, great. And we'll look forward to getting this where we can put a pencil to it when we get the minutes.
Certainly.
Thank you very much, Scott. I thought that
You're
was
welcome.
very helpful. Right. Okay, well, let's move on to the next thing on the agenda, which is the comparison among state, county, and local storm regulations.
So can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All set? Okay. I'll just quickly make a note. I did share this with you all yesterday, and there was one small change that I made within it, which I'll point out. It primarily concerns the stormwater permitting system that Montreat is part of. I incorrectly stated, or it's my understanding that it used to be in an MS4, and in my discussion briefly with Mary Roderick, she noted that it is now in an NPDES phase 2 because it is part of the Asheville urbanized area for the census. So, and if you all have any questions or comments on this, you're welcome to chime in, or if you want to wait until the end, I could do that as well.
I didn't understand anything you just said. If you could translate.
Sorry?
Could you translate what you just said about?
Oh,
And will you turn up your volume a little bit?
Pardon?
Will you turn up your volume a little bit?
Oh, sorry.
That's
Yeah,
good.
I just said that little introductory statements he just made was,
I will translate it very shortly.
I didn't understand what he said.
I can translate it shortly. I was just noting that one part of the presentation had changed from what I sent you all yesterday. So basically, just to give you a kind of a quick run through of what stormwater regulations focus on, I jokingly call it the 2 WQs. It's water quality, is it drinkable, swimmable, fishable, and water quantity, is runoff causing erosion or flooding. Temperature is actually kind of a third element of water pollution that's not as directly considered in most stormwater regulations. There's a concept called thermal pollution. If you've got water that's too warm, either coming off a parking lot or a roof, and it's going directly into a stream, that can act as kind of a shock to aquatic plant and animal species. Trout are the most common species that are, or fish are the most common species that are referenced oftentimes regarding thermal pollution. So just wanted to give you just a quick comparison of standards, and these are for erosion and sediment control, which is a slightly different animal than stormwater, but it is interrelated. Oftentimes you'll have what are called ENSC, erosion and sediment control regulations, that is basically pre-construction or during construction. And then you will have what are called post-construction stormwater regulations. That's essentially after something is finished. Just quickly looking through a handful of mountain counties and towns, you've got a somewhat consistent standard of, let's call it a half acre of disturbance. Some places make distinctions for commercial development, like in Boone, if you're doing 2,500 square feet of disturbance. Buncombe County, of course, differentiates between slopes less than 25%, requiring over a quarter acre disturbance, or if you're on a flatter spot, it's over a half acre of disturbance. So if the slope is between 15 and 25%, half acre of disturbance, over 25% slope, quarter acre of disturbance.
So Scott, this relates to like Asheville, 10,000 square feet. That means 10,000 square feet of disturbance. That's what you're going to do when you do the construction.
That's correct.
And then in taking Buncombe, the lot, first of all, has got to be greater than a quarter of an acre if the slope is 20, and the slope is greater than 25%, or a half acre if it's between 15 and 25. So that, and these are if a plan is required.
Yes, that's correct. So all of these acreages and square footage are it's the trigger, if you will, for requiring a plan. Interestingly, if you look at Lake Lure, third from the bottom, obviously the lake is their biggest natural and economic asset. So they basically say if you're disturbing over 100 square feet within 50 feet of either the lake or creeks, requires certain, a plan. If it's over 500 square feet, they're basically indexing it to, if you're further away from 50 feet from a water body, it's 500 square feet of disturbance. If you're within 50 feet of a water body, a lake floor, it's over 100 square feet. So through a couple of these, and I'll just show you and some others, I think there is, a recognition. They're trying to do an index or a recognition or gradation, if you will.
So that I understand that means between 101 to 499, there's no requirement in Lake Lure. Is that how I read that?
Basically, if you're within 50 feet of a water body, if you're disturbing more than 100 square feet, you are required to submit a plan in Lake Lure.
Okay.
And that's generally with properties fronting lakes is far more critical. They did away with the good old days when you had your boathouse right there and took your Chris-Craft right out on the lake. And
Right,
so
right.
everybody who bought lakefront property in the last 30 years found there was a big setback to get you away from the lake. You had to
So Scott, just so I understand though, but between 50 feet, well, never mind. Okay, I understand. Okay. It's the 100 square feet and the 500 square feet. Got it. Okay.
Right.
Got it.
And then on this next slide, I tried to just summarize what I have initially found in my research. Basically, I tried to break these up into three groupings of either disturbance or percent impervious. And that's an important note to make, in that some places it looks like they're picking a flat square footage amount of disturbance, and some places differentiate between a percentage. So I think that can also make a difference if you're on a small property, large property. Aquatic buffers, that the question came up earlier about setbacks. There is a state, and I believe the county mirrors it as well, standard for having a 25-foot construction buffer from drought streams. So that's, I put that in parentheses there, construction. And then of course, post-construction is the 30-foot buffer for anything that's impervious from perennial or intermittent water bodies. The treatment and storm.
So wait, before you leave the buffer, because
Yeah.
What we had thought from Wade's presentation, I may not be understanding it, that you had to be over an acre under the North Carolina and or Buncombe County. I may be wrong about Buncombe County, but this says that all three, North Carolina, Buncombe, and Town of Montreat, all require a post-construction 30-foot buffer from any perennial or intermittent, which intermittent would be like the creek that Wade was describing on his slide. Just not debating that. I just want to know the answer. All of them regulate that in that way.
That is my understanding to date.
and the state water quality regulations state that is for lots 1 acre or greater.
All right. And did you find that, Scott?
Yes, actually, if you're looking, well, I found a couple of different standards. So if you look at the very top, disturbance over 1 acre, that's consistent across state, county, and town regulations.
Okay.
Disturbance of a 1/4 acre with natural slope over 25%, that was the Buncombe County standard that I referenced. Actually, in the town of Montreat column, I should have a question mark there because I did not see anything specific to that. Disturbance of over 5,000 square feet. Didn't say anything at the state level. Buncombe County was not applicable. That is a current standard in the town of Montreat for redevelopment. Same thing for 10,000 square feet of disturbance. Yes, this addition of 2,500 square feet of impervious was what I noted in the town's code. That's for post-construction. And then there is a fairly consistent standard of equal to or less than 24% impervious coverage at the county and town level. Did not see anything specifically referenced in state law on that.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Reading right there, and it says, for example, addition of 2,500 square feet of impervious post-construction. But are you saying that all of those services more than 10,000, more than 5,000, still has that threshold issue if you're dealing with more than one?
Yeah, and I apologize. I mean, with this chart, I'm somewhat mixing apples and oranges, at least in the sense that disturbance is generally focused on pre or during construction, and post-construction is obviously a standard for after something is built. It's the treatment and handling of the stormwater after something is built in its finished state.
Okay, but I think I understand what you just said there, but my question is, go to the disturbance of more than 5,000 square feet. So if you're disturbing less than 5,000 square feet, none of this would apply. And or if you're on a lot of greater than, it only applies if it's more than 1 acre. I'm trying to tie those all together and see when does it trigger the requirement.
Yeah, and I apologize. It may almost be easier to make I think Wade could probably help me with this, making somewhat of a Venn diagram of the various standards.
I see. It's not as simple as I'm trying to make it. I understand is what you're saying.
So I'm still a little confused too. So if you have a lot comparing Buncombe and Montreat, if you disturb more than 1 acre, and that's the disturbance, that's not the size of the lot, is that right?
That's correct.
Then you've got to provide for it. And again, these are for the plans. Then if the disturbance presumably is greater than 1/4 of an acre and less than 1 acre, but there's a natural slope of greater than 25%, Buncombe regulates that, but the town of Montreat, you haven't found anything yet.
That's correct.
Then if there's a disturbance of 5,000 square feet, that's without regard to the size of the lot, is that right?
That's my understanding of my reading of the ordinance thus far. And if you like, I can go through a couple of following slides. I kind of try and compartmentalize different parts of the ordinance.
Good, okay, yep. I just don't, in my slow brain, I want to just, and I hope everybody's doing this, it's just if you've got questions, it's probably better to ask them along the way than wait.
Sure.
Slow brain, Bill. I think we're all having a slow uptake on all this complicated stuff. But my question is, if you're disturbing less than 5,000, so it would not trigger it. Is that correct? In the Montreat column?
That's my quick understanding, yes.
Yeah.
Unless it's more than 1 acre, the disturbance is, well, it would be, no, I'm sorry, excuse me. Yep.
Clearly 1 acre and clearly 10,000. If it's more than 5,000, it's going to take into 10,000 an acre.
Right.
So my question is, if it's under 5,000, it apparently does not trigger the requirements?
Well, there would be an exception. That's if at least 24% of the area would end up being impervious. That would click in
Well, that's
the
true.
Montreat plan requirement, even though it's not 5,000 square feet. So if you
Is
have
that
a
what's,
4 square
is
foot
that,
lot,
is that what's meant by the low density?
Yes, that's correct. And I can, if you all will allow me, I'll just kind of do a walkthrough of
Okay.
standards. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So, and some of this will be a little high level, so just I'll just do a quick walkthrough. So that the previous slide was just meant as a summary, and we can certainly come back to that. I'll just give you a quick walkthrough. Stormwater regulations are done through North Carolina DEQ.
You are
briefly-
fading in and out. You're still fading in and out, Scott.
I'm sorry. Let's see. Can you all hear me all right?
It's still kind of garbled sound.
very garbled.
Okay, one moment. Is the audio any better?
Well, it still sounded a little garbled. Speak a little bit more so we can see. Yes, your voice that's garbled, you know,
Your voice is garbled, Scott.
Sorry, let me check on one other thing.
I was once told I just needed to mumble louder.
I will try and mumble louder. Does that help?
That's much
Yeah.
better. Yeah.
Okay, I will try and mumble louder and slower. So this slide just gives you a quick overview of how stormwater systems are permitted and regulated. This highlight right here notes that the stormwater construction stormwater program through the state regulates disturbances of 1 acre or more. The town is now under this MPDES Phase 2 system. It was previously under MS4, that's Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. The basic difference is, to my understanding, is that MS4 was for smaller independent communities, basically because Montreat is part of the Asheville urbanized area. The watersheds and everything that runs together is treated as one larger urban system. This is just a very quick overview from NCDEQ on things that are required for minimum control measures. These are what would likely be coming out of the current stormwater study that's being done. The state currently has a water or a stormwater permit, NCGO1, that is for the disturbance of 1 acre or more.
And that's the disturbance. That's the disturbance, not the size of the lot.
That's correct. Right.
Okay.
It could be a 1 acre lot that you're disturbing, or if you have a 5 acre lot and you're disturbing 1 acre, it applies.
If you have a 1 acre lot and you're only disturbing a small part of it, then it doesn't apply.
That's correct.
Okay.
At the state level.
Right.
This chart just highlights, this is from the state, and this basically just summarizes their standard for ground stabilization timeframes. If you're in a high quality water zone, I believe it's basically a trout stream. It's 7 calendar days to stabilize any land disturbance. And I can come back to these. I'll just shortly go through these so we can look at these. At the county level, their stormwater management program was established in 2006, and this just states why they're doing it. It's for all those reasons that I mentioned before, water quality, water quantity, et cetera, et cetera. This is a summary of what they require for their post-construction stormwater. Also, they do require deed restrictions on properties that have stormwater management plans. That's an example of the language they've been using below there.
Can I interrupt you? The Buncombe County
Sure.
rules and regulations that you're just going through, do they kind of override or take effect here in Montreat regardless of what we have here? What takes precedence?
I'm sorry, could you, your audio was just a little low.
Sorry.
That's okay.
These Buncombe County requirements, what effect do they have on Montreat? Do we have to comply with all of the Buncombe County requirements regardless of what we have in addition to or in lieu of that here in Montreat?
I believe the town's requirements are independent of the county's requirements.
But do we have to comply with the Buncombe County requirements?
My understanding is if the town has their requirements, then that satisfies. If the town doesn't have requirements, then county could come in.
Well, another way to look at it is, does the stricter requirement apply? In other words, if the towns is less restrictive than the counties, would you have to apply with the counties?
I think the towns, like Wade said, supersede the counties. In other words,
Okay.
Right.
Whatever they say, they take precedent. If we have some, those requirements apply and the counties do not. Is that what you're saying, Mason?
yes, that's my understanding.
Okay.
Right. And actually, in another slide or two, I'll show you an interesting example of the town taking the county standard completely. So the county makes the distinction of low density being 24% impervious or less. Again, that's a proportion. That's not a square footage or acreage. So that's just an index. You'll see the fourth bullet there, no controls within 30 feet landward of any perennial or intermittent surface water. Essentially, that is a 30-foot buffer. There's also the note about the 1-year 24-hour storm event.
What does that mean?
Scott, on the buffer, this is no controls. That doesn't mean there couldn't be construction of a house within 30 feet of this one, or is it there's no stormwater control?
This is their erosion and sediment control.
Oh, I see.
Standards.
It's not a facility. It's the size at which, it's the location at which they regulate or control. Okay.
That's correct. It's essentially saying within 30 feet, no disturbance before, during, or after construction.
Scott, can I ask a very elementary question? What does 1 year, 24-hour storm event mean?
I'll show you that in just a moment.
Okay.
So again, and I'm just showing you actually two things. So Article V from the county is their erosion and sediment control ordinance. It's focused on construction. So again, that's more than 1 acre on a tract or a 1/4 acre on a lot with 25% slope or more. A 25-foot buffer along trout streams, And then they do have a retroactive date of 1993. Trying to remember what that bullet was. I'd have to look back at that honestly. Trying to not overwhelm with information, but so they have, again, erosion sediment control, that's before, during construction. And then they have stormwater management, that's Article 7, that's focused on post-construction. So whatever's been built has been built. They do not apply it to anything under 1 acre of disturbance. They do have a contingency for single-family dwelling construction on lots of record. They apply 15% or less imperviousness on that. Their standards and definitions, again, it's 2 dwelling units per acre or 24% base or less. A 1-year, 24-hour storm, and then all impervious surfaces are 30, they're required to be 30 feet from water bodies. I'll get to the 1 hour or 1 year.
And Scott, on that standard and definition still is only applicable up from the top to disturbances of more than 1 acre. Or is that the lot size?
Yes.
See, that's what's
Yes.
somewhat confusing.
It's on the disturbance.
Okay.
So
So-
regardless of lot, whether it's a 1 acre lot or a 100 acre lot.
Okay. So then in that bullet, it's still got to be 30 feet from water bodies.
Correct.
Okay. That's every info. Okay. Size not. Okay. Got it.
So the question a moment ago came up about what's the relationship between the town's ordinances and the county's. And for erosion sediment control, the town simply refers to the county's ordinance for erosion and sediment control.
And that's during construction, I believe, isn't it?
That's correct. Yes, this is, I'll say, during and pre-construction.
If I mess up, it's the county man that comes to see me.
That's correct. So then moving on to the town, just a couple of definitions here, or at least as I interpreted them. Certainly speak up if I've misread any of this. There's the current definition of detain. So I would assume that to be a 55-gallon rain barrel where you are keeping the rain right there with you. Retain, I would assume to be the definition of a rain garden or some other stormwater attenuation device. And then there is also just a differentiation between drainage structures and conveyance. Conveyance is just the method that the stormwater is, coursing through the landscape, whether that's on a swale, a culvert, what have you. So the town currently requires a stormwater control permit per the stormwater ordinance for any disturbed area over 5,000 square feet or something that creates more than 24% impervious cover. Again, that could be a 1 acre lot, a 10 acre lot, what have you.
How about a half an acre? How about a half acre lot?
If you're on a half acre lot and you are disturbing more than 5,000 square feet or creating more than 24% impervious cover on it, or if you're doing more than 2,500 square feet through an addition,
Okay.
that's what the town's current ordinance covers.
Okay. That was my question. Good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So the town currently requires these 3 elements for the permit. existing conditions, proposed site plans, a natural resources inventory, and a stormwater management plan. And the town differentiates between larger, what it calls larger development projects and smaller development projects. Developments on an acre or more, or on lots with less than an acre with 10,000 square feet of disturbed area. Smaller projects, developments on lots with greater than 10,000 square feet of disturbed area. And there's a note in the ordinance that talks about permeable pavement only being a detention option and not a treatment option. Again, there's the standard, and it's a little confusing. I will admit, at least as the ordinance is currently written with its definitions, and that there is a definition for built upon area, and there is also a definition for impervious area. One quick editorial comment I might offer would be to consolidate that definition to single definition for impervious area. Built upon is impervious, impervious is generally built upon. But there is that, again, the standard of being 30 feet from top of bank. There's also the definition of cumulative development over 10,000 square feet. So essentially, if you are doing either a subdivision or a phased development plan where you will be cumulatively disturbing more than 10,000 square feet, it requires a stormwater control permit.
Okay, so this is really, the 305, that first part is really the nuts and bolts of what Wade is getting to with his intermittent stream. That's all impervious material must be 30 feet from the top of the bank, no matter the size of the lot.
That's my understanding today.
Okay.
The town's ordinance also, just in my quick reading of it, allows an intensity bonus. I put an asterisk on the 50% because, as you'll see in the table below, my quick math assumption is that you get a 15% bonus for various things. So if you do grading outside of 40% slopes, if you do screening of structures, if you do stormwater BMPs, those are 15% intensity bonuses, which, as I understand, would add up to 45%, not 50%. So that may be a possible typo, not quite sure.
That also refers to reducing the fee.
Yes, I believe so. So the question earlier about the 1 year 24-hour storm, my understanding of it is it's the definition from NOAA, which is National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is the anticipated amount of precipitation that you will get in a typical storm. I believe that's averaged over 1 year, over 24 hours. And this is just another bullet here talking about the town's current ordinance, which calls for a drawdown of any stored stormwater within 48 hours and not more than 120 hours. So between 2 and 5 days.
That means you store it that much and you let it out over that period of time. Is that right?
Sorry?
That means you store it for 48 hours and it's got to stay there, and then you can let it out. And it'll take, in other words, it'll take 2 days to let it out. Maybe I said that wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think my quick understanding, and I will state that I'm not a stormwater expert yet. My understanding of that standard is that it is to allow a slow trickle over that amount of time.
Okay.
Scott, again, the reference to the requirement for the LID practices and the and those with those retention and detention numbers go under 305 section 5, which are projects cumulatively disturbing at least 10,000 square feet or more. I don't read in the ordinance that those requirements apply to the small scale projects of less than 10,000 square feet, what you call the smaller development projects.
Right. I would honestly have to look back at it. I was compiling a lot of information fairly quickly on this. I apologize if I've missed anything there.
Yeah, but let me mention another, again, just from a regulatory standpoint, particularly when we're dealing with steep slope areas. If you're simply trying to, in the regulatory process, equate post-development with pre-development conditions, the amount of time water is detained on a steep slope and the amount of water which is retained on a steep slope is extremely small and extremely brief. In other words, you take a 40% slope, the amount of water in a 24-hour event that actually stays on that slope is a very small amount. It would appears to me to be the requirements of essentially requiring the total volume on your impervious volume, and then requiring it to be retained for a minimum of drawdown time of 48 hours seems to me requiring a post-development condition that greatly exceeds the pre-development condition. And I just make that as an observation. In other words, you're requiring them to, you're requiring somebody, and I'm not saying it just is what it is. You're requiring somebody to do a lot more than nature did before they put the house there. That's my observation. I may be wrong, but water runs downhill, and when the downhill is really steep, it runs off it really quick. I know that much about it.
And I guess the only peculiarity in that is that when you get a major rain event that goes for several days, you reach a point in which even a natural lot is not holding anything anymore. It's just shedding. But that's when we have the hurricanes get here and so forth, or a consistent frog strangler for a day and a half, something like that. But Mason's right. You're gonna retain some of it.
Well, Mason's point was that you're requiring someone to do more than nature itself did. If they just left it all alone, they wouldn't have to do anything. Because
that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, that's my point. And I guess what I'm saying, and I'd like to ask some stormwater experts, but it looks to me like it's considerably more. I mean, by a very, very large magnitude. Again, not saying it's wrong from a policy standpoint, although candidly, and under Florida law, and I'm not a North Carolina lawyer, that would not be a valid regulation because there's no rational nexus to the impact being regulated and the requirement of the regulation. It's so excessive. If I'm right, and I may be wrong, but it looks to me like it's very excessive.
Well, there's one confusing thing too about the 10,000 feet. because greater than 10,000 feet, the one thing that clearly is required is that your stormwater system has to be designed by a licensed, sealed engineer. And then it goes on to say that less than 10,000 feet, they're anticipating that you're able to deal with that with LID, low intensity development. And they sort of define that as, you know, swales and you know, a little wet pond or something like that. And that, it's easier to do if it's a 5-acre site. But if you're on a smaller site, LID doesn't hold enough water according to that NOAA standard. And so that forces you to go to cisterns. And that's the, so when you look at low impact development, all of the items look kind of gentle, and then they just throw one in that says cisterns. And so that's your underground vault that's created some problems, like for the Sweetenbergs and so forth, and me. But I guess where I couldn't find Mason's not only a better lawyer than I am, I believe he's a lawyer and I'm not. But I couldn't find in the ordinance where the requirements for the stormwater control permit for the lots where 24% of the lot is disturbed. And I'm thinking that means I've got to have these underground vaults and so forth, but I didn't find anywhere that it said I didn't have to do that. The 10,000 feet sort of indicates it's not intended to have to do that, but I couldn't undo that at least 24% of the total lot area developed to include impervious area, because that's what the stormwater administrator used on me and others to say I had to put in an underground system. So I'd love it to find where it said he was wrong, although I wouldn't get my money back, but it'd be nice to know.
So Scott and or Alex, I don't know who's the right person to question. It's really, it's a mumbo going around in my head and trying to get it all together. Would it be helpful to the town council, and particularly to the residents, if the people, if the Land of Sky could work with us as they do this analysis, that we then, as Scott sort of alluded to, is rework the ordinance consistent with what they're finding and considering both the state and the county. It just seems to me to be so technical at the same. And I will say what David wanted me to convey, David Holcomb, was that he just feels that we're people that bought lots a long time ago, and yet before any of this happened, that he would, to the extent practicable, should be able to develop their lots. So with all of that in mind, it just seems to me that it's going to take us forever to do this unless we have some consultation that can, as we go through it, we can make it easier to read and understand. Am I mistaken about that? Or do y'all feel the same confusion that I do?
Absolutely. I've been saying it from day one, as you know. I agree 100% with what you just said, Bill. It's just so highly technical. I may not be the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I have a little bit of sense, and I'm just having trouble understanding what it all says when you try to put it down on a practical level for what somebody could do as they're trying to develop a lot, what their restraints are or not, and so forth. It's just very, very confusing to me.
And that, I think, was one of Wade's points too that he reminded me of over the weekend, that he feels like the ordinance is so poorly written, maybe poorly, but so confusingly written that it's hard for anybody to understand. But I don't know if that's feasible or not, or if there's money to do that or what have you. So,
My understanding from the conversations with the consultants who are doing this is that they're looking for town-wide community solutions. That would include looking at an individual lot and saying, this should, would help the situation. But they're looking for ways for us as a town to do what all these regulations want, and that's less pollutants being in the Swananoa River. And so I think as they're looking at our individual problem areas, like the one that wiped out Calvin Trail or took out Louisiana in the hurricane, it's not going to be restricted to property lines. It'll be that, here's a group of lots, and the water from that group of lots is accumulating in a place that overpowers everything downstream. And so an example of that would be where you identified a spot like that and you came up with an engineering piece that would slow that volume in its place so that it more gradually went the rest of the way down. To be very specific, if you took the inside curve of a hairpin turn, and that was where a good bit of water was accumulating, and you merely let that go into a couple of concrete vaults that disappeared and were buried, and those had gate valves for slow release, then you would have taken those couple of thousand gallons at that point and slowed that release down. Whereas in the middle of that range, it's just rushing down.
I can appreciate that way, but I'm trying to get at what y'all wanted us to do was to see if there, and to David's point, whether there are ways that we can encourage people that want to develop their lots to do it. But I don't know how you do that unless you look at the whole thing. It's not the overall structure so much as how are we going to encourage, if we want to encourage development and people to use their lots?
Well, I can say that to the extent there's some confusion over whether the retention requirement, and I'm talking about the standard that's set forth in 305 5 B and D, which is the 48-hour, 120-hour deal. I don't believe that is intended by the way the ordinance is structured. We need to let Scott look at it. Although Wade indicates that it has been construed as applicable to single-family residences, at least in a couple of situations which he's been involved in. I don't think the ordinance intends for that to apply to residential lots, specifically those less than 10,000 square feet. Those smaller projects are particularly and encouraged to use a list of basically residential scale BMPs, which don't have that kind of detention and retention. Those whole systems that they've got and they list in the ordinance aren't the type to do that kind of heavy retention and detention work. They're more treatment options. Maybe we can clarify that in the ordinance, and that's certainly in terms of minimizing or clarifying the impact of the ordinance on residential construction in Montreat. That would be helpful, and we could do that fairly easily.
I'm looking at the ordinance and I see 305 general standards, and then 305 subsection 5 is what's talking about at least 10,000 square feet of disturbance.
And so 5, what's applicable, these standards in A, B, C, D, and E are all applicable to projects of 10,000 square feet or more. That's right. That's just the way it works. Right. But apparently, Wade indicates that the town staff in the past has, in effect, applied these same standards to construction on residential lots of less than 10,000 square feet. And they're somehow reading in 5D that somehow that applies regardless whether it's residential or greater or less than 10,000 square feet. I'm not sure how it does that.
And you're reading 5B. Yeah, I don't see that it still applies to 5. It's 5 is still the
Five's
guiding-
controlling. Five's
Controlling.
controlling, and I don't see any ambiguity in it. But apparently, staff has found enough ambiguity to make it apply to residential projects in the past, and I don't think it's certainly what's intended by a plain reading of the ordinance. You know, and I told Wade, you know, it could, if the town's trying to enforce it that way, the town's going to lose in any sort of lawsuit just by the plain way the ordinance is structured. But that would, if that's a point of confusion in making the more onerous parts of the stormwater requirements applicable to small lot projects, we can certainly make that recommendation to the town that we clarify that in fact this 24-hour duration storm event retention and detention requirements are not applicable to lots.
Yeah.
That would go a long
Less
way.
than 10,000 square feet.
So I'm making a point of that. So that's one thing we could do. The other thing we could do, if we wanted to, was to change the 30-foot requirement from streams, including intermittent streams. I'm not advocating that at this point, but that's one of the things that Wade was asking for clarification. That should be only if it's greater than a 1 acre lot. That's a second thing, right? Okay.
Yeah, if we clarified both of those items, Wade, that would go a long way to solving your concerns, right?
I think it's a 4-letter word, amen. Amen.
So then, Scott, to help us, if is there a way then to go back and see that it's already confused? I'm already confused by the statistics to see what other communities are doing with intermittent streams and that buffer. Since you've called it a buffer, have you told us what that is, or are we the only community doing that?
I would have to follow up on that, honestly.
Okay. Would that be helpful to the committee?
Yes. I would also be interested to see if other communities allowed mitigation. In other words, if you have an intermittent stream, can you go ahead and build within that buffer or reroute the stream and provide mitigation so that we provide lot owners that do have an intermittent stream for their lot a way to accommodate development on the lot through reasonable mitigation.
Okay.
Well, there's one thing that, one conclusion I came to. I find an awful lot of things in the ordinance that I think are extreme. All of that disappears if those requirements are on a larger piece of property. Because on larger pieces of property, like a lot of new development is in the mountains, they're not, new development on mountains don't go 1/4 acre anymore. You've got enough room to do the LID solution. And that is reasonable and has everybody sharing in the responsibility of not polluting Swannoa River and then the Broad River.
Well, would y'all be willing to consider that at our next meeting so Scott can do some research? What I'm trying to do is move us along and either throw up our hands and say, town, you go do it, it's going to require a lot more. Or if we can do some of this, and then we might also recommend that as this study moves along, that other considerations for simplifying the ordinance ought to be articulated by the consultants. And ultimately, I guess it would be referred to the town council. Does that make sense to y'all?
Yes.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Okay. Scott, I want to, you have made it sounds like we're still confused, but it has made it a little easier to at least comprehend the bigger picture, but this has been very helpful to me. So
I'd just like to say it's been nice to see what everybody looks like for the first time in a year and a half.
Bill, Roberts, or Sally, do y'all have anything to add or suggest? Or we're glad y'all are here too.
I like the plan. I think it's a good plan. And Scott, thanks for all the work you did putting it in.
Right. So let's see. I articulated what David Holcomb said. Wade, do you want? I think we've accomplished what you wanted to do, and it's 11:45. Have we covered what you wanted to say at this meeting beyond what you've said before, or added to your report in the minutes?
I think we're at a good place, and I think that the conversation about the 30-foot buffer and the lot size will be interesting for us, and I think it's very important that we try and find something that's fair.
Okay. So Scott, and as you compare those the other communities on both the buffer and on the large versus small projects, that would be helpful. And I guess if you could put it on a chart that we could then compare, and you might throw in Buncombe County and the state in that too. Just start with the state and then Buncombe County, then Montreat and other communities so that we could compare it all in some way that it's all together. It's maybe impossible to do.
I will certainly give it another couple of notes, and I do apologize if I confused or overwhelmed with information today. I was trying my best to take information from a lot of different places and make sense of it.
I think you did a great job.
You did a great job, Scott. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Well, is there anything else anything more that we need to cover today?
Bill, just one final comment. We kind of focus on two areas, and I think that's very helpful to me. I commend kind of focusing us down on those particular two areas, and I think if we could clarify those, that would be a major accomplishment. I do wonder, and I guess it's more of a question than a suggestion or a comment, if there's any way that we, even if we take those two aside, that the whole ordinance itself could be somehow simplified or made a little bit less technical than it is, and maybe that's impossible because of the nature. I understand that, but just maybe don't lose sight of that possibility if there's any way to do that.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. That's what I was attempting to say by asking the consultants to work with us and making some recommendations to make the ordinance simpler, generally speaking. And I don't know if the town, what they're paying them would cover that. So that's something that, Scott, maybe you could clarify that with Alex. And if if the town doesn't want to pay for it, just make Alex pay for it.
Yeah.
Second.
Object.
All right. Well, do we want to look at a meeting date for our next time? We've been meeting every 2 weeks. Are y'all comfortable with that, or you want to? Of course, we're coming into Christmas now, so we might want to. 2 weeks would be the week of the 15th.
I don't know how much time Scott needs, so I don't want to put pressure on him this time.
Yeah, that's true. Would you rather wait till the first week in January?
I I mean, I'm willing to see what I can find within 2 weeks, but certainly if I had until January, I'd probably be able to give you a more comprehensive follow-up, and certainly in coordinating with the consultants and Mary on that.
Would y'all be willing to meet on the 5th or the 7th? Probably the
Works
7th
for me.
is further away. Thursday the 7th.
Okay.
Everybody okay with that?
Works for me.
Okay, Thursday the 7th at 10:30. And I found this a lot more helpful than I expected. I really have learned a lot. That doesn't mean that it's filtered into my brain, but at least it's rolling around now where it can now, if he gives us a stormwater management plan that can handle my confusion and have that drain into the right parts of my brain, I think we'll be in good shape.
Started out, I felt like I was a kindergartner. I'm about a second grader now.
Yeah,
Okay,
my only concern is it's going to be so long, I might have to repeat everything I said so it'll be fresh with everybody. So y'all watch out.
you're going to be ruled out of order.
I'm married. I'm used to that.
Poor Wade, I asked him Saturday, we were going to talk Saturday morning, but I couldn't, I guess it was Friday morning, but I was going somewhere with Peggy. I don't remember where, but I did the doctor, I think. But he got in the car and drove furniture to Atlanta for one of his wife's daughters, I think. And he was talking to me on the phone at 3 o'clock, and he'd gotten halfway to Atlanta. So poor guy got back late that night, Friday night, and he just goes all over everywhere.
That's rearranging furniture in my house.
Yeah. Okay, well, without more, thank you particularly to Scott. Thanks to Angie and Alex for arranging it. And thanks to all y'all for being here. And congratulations to Sally again for her new
Yes,
Grand-
congratulations.
grandchild. Great. Okay. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Oh, meeting
Thanks.
adjourned. Is that we do that? Somebody-
Yeah, I guess we have to have a motion. Does anybody want to move that?
So
Sally raised her hand. Is there a second? Mason? Okay, all in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye. All opposed? Thank y'all very much. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
Bye-bye.